So what I was looking for was, now that we have a SysML model that backs the MTConnect standard, is there a way that we can take that rigid structure of SysML and automate the development of, our C# code, right? So just to give you kind of a peek in the behind the scenes of that model browser. So the content for this site is essentially derived from this content. So this is another export from Cameo. Cameo allows you to save out the SysML model in the form of XMI, which is an XML document. And this contains the full definition of the standard. So you'll see down here below, there's 11.5 million lines of XML. It's a very large file.
Yep.
But this has everything defined in the MTConnect standard. So what we decided is that we can start to flesh out a series of C# libraries that we can use to help automate the consumption of this document and help facilitate developers to use that rigid object-oriented model that represents this in a way that they can produce other media. For example, C# code. If I want to automatically write C# code with this information backing it, we're going to create a library that helps facilitate that. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
So what we have in practice now, and I've been working on this for the past couple of weeks, kind of redesigning a little bit of this library, but we have a handful of core C# NuGet packages that you can include in your projects. The first one that I'll start off with is the MTConnect Transpiler. So this is an open source project, and the purpose of this library is simply just to consume this XML document. So it will deserialize this XML document and put it into a rigid object-oriented structure. Okay. So we see here, if I go back into this XML, we have representations for enumeration literals, enumerations, classes, packages, everything that would be normally defined in a UML model. We have class structures to represent that. So we have UML classes, we have enumerations and literals, we have a large coverage of what's defined in that document. So when you implement this transpiler, you can navigate this model, right? When you deserialize the document, the XML document, it will produce, I gotta remember, I think it produces this XMI document. So this is kind of the root class that you'll be presented with when you supply this library with the XML file. So within this class structure, you have access to the full UML model, which is the root node here for the XML structure. And from there, you can navigate down, into any part of the MTConnect model, through profiles and packages. Are you following along so far?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Yep.
Yep. So what I've found over the past probably year and a half is that this alone is still really daunting for developers, because it requires them to have an advanced understanding of the structure for this XML document. I mean, this thing is massive and it's interconnected. It's very hard to navigate. So what I have introduced on top of the MTConnect Transpiler library is a sync for C#. So this is what I'm introducing in a new version coming out soon, which is different from what's currently published. The existing library that's out there is a very lightweight sync for C# that basically just passes along that XMI document, and you still have to navigate this really complicated structure. So I've identified that, like I said, it's really hard to navigate that, so we want to try and move away. So with this new version, I've basically implemented a new transpiler process that will take that XMI document and create C# code that is equivalent to a representation of the model. Okay.
Okay.
So, and I can kind of navigate this a little bit. So what I've done is in this project right here, the example project, this contains an implementation of the transpiler to navigate that really complicated XMI document, and then go ahead and produce C# code that will be used in the library that ideally you would reference. If you're going to try to use the standard in your code. So this example project, like I said, navigates this XMI document for you and automatically generates a bunch of code for the library. And that library is represented up here in this other project, where in the models folder, we have a full representation of the MTConnect model in a series of classes. So if we look into this a little bit further, we have classes and packages and enums, that are similar to your UML model or SysML model, but it's a lot easier to navigate as a developer. So if I start off by looking at the root here, which is the MTConnect model, I have a series of static packages, which are class instances that represent each kind of major section of the standard. So if I look also at the model browser, you'll see here that there's an apples to apples. There's synonymous vocabulary here between the model browser and how you navigate the C# library. So if I'm looking at the model browser and I want to get to data items, I can find the device information model package here. Break this out. So I can find this property. I can navigate into this class. I can navigate into this class. And within this class, I've got a full documentation. I can use the IntelliSense to get the full definition that's in the model browser, but in Visual Studio. It's a little bit laggy here. But let's say I've navigated into the device information model and I still want to get to data items. Well, then I can navigate through the packages, or I can reference the data items package directly. And now I have access to this class definition. This is a full representation of this portion of the standard. Now, if I want to get, down to like a smaller segment of the standard, like I want to look at the actual class definition in UML for a data item, I've now navigated down to a place where I can access that information model, right?
Yep.
So here we have classes, and now I have access to the data item class. And what's in here is exactly what you see in the model browser, but it's in a easy to navigate, C# library instead. So from here, I have access to all the properties for data item. And for each of these properties, I have a reference to its name, when it was introduced, when it was deprecated, what it actually means as defined in the standard. So the documentation. C# related types. So you can use reflection in C# to dig into like value types, for example. You following along still? And any questions so far?
So is your C# library automatically, pulling the data from the model web browser, or you specify the specific version of the model web browser? I'm just curious about whether your library automatically detects the model browser.
Yep, it's a really good question.
Mm.
So going back to the MTConnect Transpiler project, I've provided a couple different options for the source for how you deserialize the XML file into this UML structure. There's a couple out-of-the-box solutions, like let's say you have a copy of the XML file on your computer. You can supply the file path for that XML document directly, and then it will deserialize that file. There's another option for GitHub to get the latest release version of the model.
I see.
This requires maintenance on our side to make sure that we keep up with the release schedule of the standard. If we go to MTConnect, and then the MTConnect SysML model. Oh, that's the dev one. Hang on. I have to search for it. Oh, there it is. So if we go to this repository and we look at the releases, it basically looks at the latest tag for the release and then gets the model XML file.
I see.
And then there's another option here for mtconnect.org, which is currently not working. But essentially what this does is when this site is supposed to be published, if you look down in the lower left corner, there's supposed to be a file here for MTConnect SysML model.xml, but that link is broken right now. Looks like they forgot to add the file there.
Yep. I see.
So those are kind of some out-of-the-box ways of choosing the version that you want to transpile from. But kind of the beauty of this library is that I'm trying to make sure that you can supply any published version of MTConnect and transpile that version.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So obviously we're going to prioritize the latest version in terms of how we structure this library. So it's possible that over time, like, it won't support older versions. But